In this video, I'm going to talk about stationery design business profit margins. And I think I have a hot take, so let's just go ahead and dive in. Hi, I'm Lainey. I'm a wedding invitation designer. I love to teach people how to start, grow, run successful stationery businesses. I have a full membership for this. I have pricing courses on getting started, just so many different resources that you can access. Check out the link in the description of this video and comment if you have any questions about anything. While you're here, I hope you'll like and subscribe and check out some of our other stationery design videos too. So let's talk about profit margins. A profit margin is basically what percentage of your entire revenue, all the money you bring in, is profit. So if you bring in $100,000 a year and you have $25,000 worth of expenses, then $75,000 is your profit and 75% is your profit margin. If you bring in 100 and you have $60,000 in expenses, you have a 40% profit margin. Generally, you might have heard of profit margins on places like Shark Tank, where people are trying to bring on investors. They're trying to expand, they're trying to get venture capital, they're trying to get people to give them money. And in order to do that, they need to prove that their business has a good profit margin. For these companies that are huge, sometimes like a 10% profit margin is seen to be good because it's past all of your expenses. It's just what's left over as profit. So even as small as 10% can be good. But I think it's important to consider why you need a profit margin in your business, and that can help you determine exactly how high it needs to be, because you're not necessarily looking to take on an investor. You're not necessarily looking for a shark to come give you $1 million for your business ever in the future. So if that's not a goal you have for the future, it might not be as important to pay attention to what the profit margin percentage is, and it might be more important just to pay attention to what your profit is. This is something that I talk about a lot more in my course, Power and Pricing, which is a very deep dive on all things pricing for stationery design businesses. So I hope you'll check it out in the link in the description of this video. So in general, you need a profit to cover all of your expenses. If you buy something for $1 and you sell it for $1, you're actually going to lose money because you have to pay credit card processing fees. You're going to eventually have to pay some taxes. You're going to have to pay for your overhead, keeping your lights on, keeping your internet on, etc. So as a business owner, there's a lot of things that go into running the business and keeping the lights on outside of the direct expenses. So if you pay $1 for something, you might say, oh, well, I'll just charge $1.50 for it and then I'm not losing out. So that's giving you about a 33% profit margin. And then that has to cover your pay, your time, the credit card fees, any taxes, because about 20% of that profit is going to go to taxes, certifications, education, anything that you need that you're kind of not directly billing for. So in general, it's good to kind of set an ideal profit margin and then use that when you're deciding on your prices to charge for things. In the stationery world, most of us use 2.5 to 3 times what something costs. So if something costs $1, we're usually charging about $2.5 to $3 for that piece. And if I charge $3 for something that costs me $1, then my profit margin is actually 66%. This is a lot higher than that like 10% that we were talking about with kind of Shark Tank, massive, huge companies that are looking for investors. There's a lot of reasons for this. First and foremost, that most of us are operating as an LLC or a sole proprietorship, and our pay is not considered an expense. So that's going to come out of that profit margin. If you have a lower one, you're not necessarily paying yourself quite enough. If you operate as like an S Corp or a C Corp, then all of your payroll is going to come out of that and be an expense, and your profit is going to be after your payment. So you're going to need a higher profit margin in a company where your pay and your payroll is not actually coming out as an expense. You also don't have the scale that these companies do, so we're not doing the same thing hundreds and hundreds of thousands of times a year, so we don't really have it down to a science. You might find that your profit margin on one order is a little bit different than a profit margin on the next order, and that's okay as long as you're kind of in that like 2.5 to 3 times range, because that's typically going to get you enough to pay for overhead, keeping the lights on, taxes, pay yourself, etc. Now, I mentioned in the beginning that I had kind of a hot take, and that is that I don't think your profit margin really matters too much unless you're trying to get big, trying to bring on a team, take on investors, get venture capital, etc. If you are trying to stay a pretty small 1 or 2 person business for pretty much the length of your business, then your margin doesn't really matter that much. Someone who brings in $200,000 and has $100,000 worth of expenses is taking home $100,000. Someone who brings in $125,000 and has $25,000 worth of expenses is also bringing it home $100,000. So when it comes down to it, you can really pay attention to what that profit number is more so than you need to pay attention to what that margin is. I think the place that the margin really comes in handy is when you're talking about how to charge for your work. And if you're building up, including like your design fee and then expenses plus margins, that's where you're gonna wanna use that like 2.5 to 3 times number. But as far as your overall business, as long as you're paying yourself enough, bringing in as much as you need to bring in, it kind of doesn't matter if you have a lot more gross revenue and higher expenses or a little bit less gross revenue but lower expenses. It kind of doesn't really matter as long as you're netting what you need to net to fully support yourself. So a lot of people are always asking about profit margins, but I think we're considering those, most of us, from a smaller like per job, per invoice point of view, as opposed to looking at it as a whole for your entire business for the year. In general, you'll be able to refine your invoicing pricing strategy as you get more comfortable with your expenses, how long things are taking you, how much things cost. If you want to learn more about invoices, charging, margins, see all of my pricing and everything that goes into it, check out Power and Pricing, which I'll link in the description of this video for you. I hope this was sort of a helpful discussion. I know there's not really an answer here because to some extent your profit margin doesn't matter, but if you're starting out, if you're not really sure how to price, start with that 2.5 to 3 times for pretty much all of your expenses, and then include your time on top of that, and you'll be starting out well, and you can further refine as you go. While you're here, I hope you'll check out some of our other videos, and if you do want to dive deeper into this, please check out Power and Pricing. It's the best course out there for stationery design pricing, so I hope you'll give it a look. Thanks, everybody.